I think a lot of people in the audience have either a terminal illness or have lost a child or are in the process of being forced to face the issue. When you're healthy and everything goes well, nobody wants to think about it, which is ridiculous. Because if you live fully and learn to live without fear and guilt, it doesn't matter whether you live 20 years or 90 years.
On October 12th, 2016, an event occurred in my life that shifted my perspective forever. My 19-year-old brother and best friend died. When I heard about this term project, I knew instantly that this had to be my topic. I've been grateful for any opportunity that I get to talk about this intimidating subject and spread more awareness. So I took this project a step further and interviewed some people that I knew to answer some questions that we all may have. Can you introduce yourself, please, and tell us what you do?
Yes, my name is Mark Bajent. I'm the practicum student here at the Children's Grief Center. I'm currently a student in Gonzaga University.
My name is Dr. Nancy Angel Detzel, and I'm a professor at Mount Royal University.
My name is Ewan Kennedy, and I'm a student at the University of Calgary.
My name is Yelena Kolesnikova. I am a records management analyst and I volunteer in the Spiritual Gateway Center in Calgary. And currently I'm a president of this spiritual center.
My name is Laura Coatsworth and I am a counselor with the Children's Grief Center. So I provide support to families with kids under the age of 18 after a loss that is anticipated or sudden in nature.
Have you lost anyone in your life?
I have. My grandma on my dad's side when I was quite little, although I do still have some memories of her. And then I lost my grandfather when I was in grade 7. My other grandparents died before I was born, so I don't have any knowing of them, but that in and of itself actually feels like a loss to me when I hear so much about story, especially of my mom's dad. I would have loved to have met him. And then since then as well, one of my very dear friends, both of her parents died of cancer. They would have been very close to me.
I've lost both of my grandparents that were alive when I was born. My grandma died when I was 16, and my grandpa died a couple years ago when I was 24 or 23.
I lost 3 people very close to me. My father, my brother, and my mother.
I lost one of my friends, Josh, over a year ago, but we were good friends for a good few years. It was a big blow to myself and my other friends, and yeah, it was a hard thing to cope with, but it did teach me a lot about myself and about the world.
I lost my son, Daniel, 3 years ago in October 2016.
Would society be more inclusive and less judgmental if talking about death wasn't so taboo? Why is death such an uncomfortable term for so many people?
Because death to many people almost seems mystical and not really understood by people who may not have experienced a loss.
I think that people are afraid to acknowledge death because then it means that everything that they do in the moment has to be perfect, because if you acknowledge that you're going to die sometime, then you have to make the best of every single second and every single moment that you have, and that is a pretty daunting thought to feel like you have to be using every moment perfectly.
And it's very hard to articulate sometimes the emotion attached to grief. And also talking about it sometimes opens up the wound.
Another thing is I think that people don't know how to respond to their peers and their family and their friends when they're in emotional hardship. And so when someone in someone's life dies, it's hard to know what to say to someone. So I think for fear of embarrassment or that they're doing it wrong or that they're not going to be helpful, I think that people avoid talking about death with others for that reason as well.
I think because facing one's own mortality is difficult. I think generally as a society, whether it's death or other topics that are hard, people are avoided, right? You don't talk about politics at the dinner table. You don't talk about sex openly. We have lots of things that are taboo, and I think that death is one of them because people are uncomfortable about being uncomfortable.
I think it's important to discuss death because it is something that's just so hidden with most people, and especially in school. It's not something that's mentioned in any primary school. I think everyone's afraid of dying because of the unknown, but I think it'd be better to talk about that unknown and dying itself. I think it'd make people feel better about it and more comfortable. Yeah.
Death is a circle of life. It's part of life. We all will die one day. No one could escape death.
I think it's so crucial because one of the things that we're missing so much in the world today is connection and human compassion. And part of the reason is we have our cell phones on hand all the time. And ironically, we are constantly checking for social updates while we're socially connected with someone right in front of us. And we choose not to connect one-to-one, and we choose to connect through the phone instead. And it's really hard to show compassion through a phone or through words online. So I think it's important to continue trying to build that connection and compassion with people in a face-to-face way. It would be more effective and more helpful generally to just go and offer that support and do things for people. A lot of people feel afraid to be too present in someone's life when they're grieving, and oftentimes that will lead to that person feeling isolated and like they're not cared for. So to just reach out and care for those people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Should we be more educated on death from a younger age?
Oh, absolutely. 150%. Yes, I wish we did. I have loved the opportunities that I've had to go into grade 5 or 6 classrooms. I remember very distinctly when I was in grade 6 and the death of somebody's mom who had completed suicide was announced to our class. And I feel like what happened is in the classroom of people were not only just processing the fact that that had happened, but even coming to terms with the idea that that is a reality and a means of dying, or what that means. And I think if we talked more openly from the get-go, then we would just give more space for people to work through what happened instead of being over here at, oh, I just can't believe it, or I'm trying to make sense of 2 different pieces at the same time.
When young children lose somebody, often they just don't understand, or they still believe maybe they're going to wake up, they're going to come back. If children are able to talk to each other, this is something that happens, part of life, and also bring a spiritual component in to maybe educate them that the high possibility of life beyond this life.
I do think that it should be spoken about more freely. I don't know how that would look. I know that there would be lots of complaints from parents, because if the parents don't have a perspective of why it's important to talk about death, then if they hear their kids are being taught about death and it's a taboo to the parents, they're going to have issues with it. I think it would be wonderful if we could set the tone early on in a child's life that life is precious and we can do with it what we want, and we have some choice in that. That would be wonderful. Because it really starts at the top, and if those who are teaching our young people how to communicate with others and how to be compassionate don't know how to talk about death and dying, then they're never going to be able to teach the kids that are growing up and to be able to do that with their peers. So I think educating parents is a great first step so that they can then filter that down to their children.
Yeah. Do you think death affects the way that people perceive you?
I think it does make people look at you differently. It's something that people won't want to bring up with you, obviously, but they'll always kind of acknowledge that it's there, and it's something you've been through. So I think it is something that should be talked more openly about because of that as well. Not that you can't talk about it with people, but most people try to avoid it.
Because in our society we don't talk about death. We don't talk about loss. We only want to talk about fun, career.
How do you contribute to society when it comes to openly discussing dying and grieving? Think about your own experiences with it and how you feel hearing the term. Does it make you uneasy? Does it make you scared? Or is this something easier for you to talk about and listen to? Has losing someone close to you or multiple people close to you changed your view on life in any way?
Yes, for sure. It's very painful, and I see life through my grief. It's totally turn my life and my understanding of life upside down.
Totally changed my view on life. First thing it did was make me realize I'm not promised tomorrow. That was major because we should be kind in the now.
I could say that every moment is a treasure, every moment in life, and you don't have to worry much about your style, about your material stuff around you. You have to worry about relationship with your loved ones.
It forced me to live more in the now and not to think, oh, I can do it tomorrow. So I'm not really a procrastinator. I'm a do it now person. It's brought more quality to my life in a sense that the people I lost, I felt like I had to carry their voices also. So musically, I would write music that would be connected with them, saying if they were here, this is probably something we would do together. And it also stretched my heart to give compassion to other people that have had losses.
Thank you. What inspired you to go into this line of work?
So I toured as a music director for a children's choir from Uganda for 3 years across the US. And at that point in time, I had intended to do music as my profession. And then in the second tour, the kids had come from various vulnerable backgrounds, a lot of them having experienced grief and loss. And so it was working with one young person in particular who's 8, and he witnessed his brother's death at a hospital, even though they both had the same illness that they came in for. His brother didn't make it and he did. And then after that point in time on tour, a lot came up for him in his own grief in some really distressing and unfamiliar ways. And at that point in time, I felt like I could be a compassionate presence and hold space that was safe for this young person, but I didn't know how to carry him through any more of his processing in a more therapeutic way, and I wanted to. So from there I left music and I applied to do my master's, and then that brought me into this field. And so I feel like at first when I entered, a lot of what I did was to be able to give back to that particular person where I felt like I didn't know what I was doing or how to help more than I could.
Thank you.
I think that I originally wanted to do this kind of work because my whole life I've been a helper, and I feel like when someone important in your life dies, that is one of the hardest times that people can experience. If I'm thinking about where to help people the most, it would be in those darkest, hardest times. So for me, I've always wanted to help people through darkness and try to find some sort of light in those dark moments.
What do you think the first step in openly discussing death and dying is?
At first I was going to say to get over yourself, but that doesn't sound very eloquent, so you could edit that part out if you want. I think I more mean that I think you have to first be comfortable with being uncomfortable yourself to have those conversations. I used to shy away at telling people what I did. I've made up what I do to people. I've limited information because I don't want to talk about it, or I don't know, sometimes I just don't want to mitigate how people become uncomfortable in their response. And I think more and more I've shifted my tone to just be really open about what I do and why I do it, in hopes that that may help us spark a further conversation in our society about a human experience everyone will encounter.
Yeah, for sure.